Okay, so we were just barely talking about, I mean, everybody talks about data-driven and all of these things, but we were talking about some unique situations where a lot of business owners, they've been through the brand voice message, the customer avatar thing. They've put in that work, which I don't think is a bad thing.
Yep.
But then it's almost like they get a bit locked in that area,
Stubborn.
and convinced that because they did that work, which is great, that's what we need to stick with when the customers are voting with their dollars in a different direction.
Yep.
Maybe you can clarify what I'm getting at with that. Yeah.
Well, I think one thing, and I think we've all fallen prey to this before, but being too overly focused on like what you want the message and the image to be versus what the customer reacts and pays for.
Yeah.
And some examples that I would use is oftentimes I see, and it's normally the individual that's very brand centric, right? Especially if they want to present a high end brand.
Right.
They become so obsessed with how everything looks and feels to them that they're actually focusing on the wrong person.
Yeah.
You need to focus on the customer who's going to buy it.
Right.
And where this is coming from is actually I've run a bunch of campaigns where I've seen where the business owners is like dead set on the vision and the brand and everything has to look a certain way, yet those campaigns perform very poorly. And then when we switch it up and do it more in the way that the customer responds to, the business owner is unhappy with how the image, brand, and voice looks, but the customers are responding and buying.
And so they're happy with the money coming in.
Yep.
But they're not happy with the images or the video because they're not pro quality or any of that stuff.
Or they don't look a very specific way, maybe the way they envisioned it. And I go back to when I first started doing my fitness business. We initially wanted to go after like this high end, and I think a lot of trainers do this, but high end, highly motivated, willing to spend a lot of money type of client. And we kind of just kept pushing that over and over and over again. And we noticed we had no customers. No one would pay us, even though we were like, we deserve the high paying customer. This is the best product out there. No customers. But we had people like beating our door down saying, can you help us lose weight? Can you help us get fit? And this is the exact thing we were trying to get away from. And we finally caved in because we're like, well, these people are literally like throwing their money at us, asking us, can we help them? Maybe it's time to make a pivot and make a change. Yeah. And when we did that, we started seeing great success. And so I say that because it is very common in my experience, especially if it's a newer business owner, or maybe someone that has the habit of comparing themselves to other bigger brands, where they get so locked in on how everything needs to look that they don't do enough testing to see what gets the customer to buy, and then how do I do more of that?
Right.
And that's kind of the point of this topic, is to almost tell you, make sure you're not making this mistake where you're doing it a certain way because you want it, but the customer or the market's not actually even paying for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is when I went to college. I have a degree in business information systems, and I had a bunch of business classes with that. And it was 101. It's like marketing 101. You are not your customer.
Yep.
You are not the one going in there and buying this thing to fix this problem. You've already solved the problem.
Yep.
So you are a completely different person than your customer is. And so the best way to figure out what your customers want is to ask them and let them vote with their money. And this is where, free market forces, if we want to start using some economic terms, free market forces, this is how that stuff works. And you see this all the time in restaurants, right? If you have ever been to a brand new restaurant that just opened up in a place, they have a menu. And that menu is the chef's best guess of what people might like, right? And I've helped open restaurants before when I was working at the ski resort. And it is. There's lots of meetings about, what kind of food we want to have. You're meeting with the general manager of the resort and everything. And I was in a lot of those meetings mostly because I'm the tech guy and I've got to be able to make sure their systems are selling and all of this. But all of it is this big guess.
Yeah.
And then when people start showing up, you see what they're buying.
Yep.
And then you drop the things on the menu that they're not buying.
Yep.
And then you add more things to the menu to see if you can find a few winners.
Yep.
Right? But the ones that are selling, you don't get rid of those.
Yeah.
You never get rid of those. And I don't know why in business, in like a more a non-food business, this concept is harder for people to grasp or something. And I think one of the things you said really drove the point home in that they're comparing themselves oftentimes to much bigger brands.
Yes.
Right? My wife and I watched The House of Gucci.
Okay.
Movie.
Okay.
and I've never owned anything Gucci.
Me
Probably
neither.
never will. But there's this high-end fashion brand with a specific look and whatever. The thing is, if I were to launch a clothing brand today, it would be absolutely crazy for me to try to dump so much money into the photography and the videography and everything to match that brand, because I'm not Gucci. Not yet. Like, if I wanted to be as big as Gucci, whatever, I think that's possible. But you aren't at that stage yet where that even makes sense. You need to come down to this lower stage. And I think the waters get, one last thing, even a little bit muddier in that with social media ads, people want to see the types of ads that they expect to see in their news feed.
Yep.
So when you have a very organic looking photo of, someone modeling something and it's clearly not a pro photo shoot, that oftentimes can resonate better with your customers than a high fashion, very professional, highly edited, perfect photo.
Yep, and I would agree. And in fact, not only will I agree, I can just tell you just from looking at data, that seems to be the case. The ones that are like very organic and almost look like they're not an ad are the ones that perform the best. And the way you can take that information is to essentially let yourself test different ways of communicating to your audience, and then focus on doing more of what works and remove your emotion from how you wish or want it to be, right? Like an example would say, like, I sure wish I was 6'10" and was in the NBA, but I'm not, right?
Right.
So I can't behave like I'm a 6'10" and expect things that a 6'10" NBA basketball player would expect when I'm not any of that, right? And that's kind of how you have to view your businesses. You have to go, where am I at right now? What is the customer really looking for? And then grow your way into it. A lot of the big brands that you see or, aspire to be or emulate, do the things that they did when they first began. For example, selling sneakers out of a trunk, selling CDs on a street, one-to-one, actually knocking on people's doors to sell their shampoo. These are examples of billionaires that have a lot of money, that they have very extravagant marketing campaigns now, but that is the wrong stage for you to be following. You need to do what they did when they're at your stage.
And you're always going to be frustrated if you try to follow the stage of a large brand.
Yes.
Or follow the strategy of a large brand, because it's frankly impossible for a small business to do that. Why?
Money.
Money. Like these large brands have marketing departments that are hundreds of people large. And then they have entire departments that are just for media production, where they have entire studios and everything to take all of these photos. And I know you can get a $2,000 camera and a nice lens and some decent lights and get kind of close, but that's a waste of your time to put all that effort into a couple of photos. It's just not worth it. You're much better off snapping some photos, focusing on your brand message, and figuring out which of those work, and then scaling up the things that work.
Exactly. I think messaging is more, because you can always fine-tune photos and videos and things like that, but it's the messaging that actually matters the most, because if you can resonate with the customer, then you can start making much more, because you figured out what message works. Then you can start making much more prolific type of campaigns with better pictures and better video, and you can kind of upgrade that way. And that's exactly how the brands that maybe you aspire to be did it. They figured out what their market is, what the message is, who's their actual customer and buyer, figured out how to give them more of that stuff, and then build campaigns around that, the messaging, instead of guessing and doing these elaborate photo shoots or video shoots of another big brand without even knowing what message works.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite brands on Instagram is a good example of this. It's a brand that's targeted towards middle-aged men, like myself. And the brand is called Chubbies, and they started off selling just swim shorts.
Okay, yeah.
And when they first started off, and their swim shorts are kind of like bright and loud and everything, because traditionally swim shorts for dudes have always been, I don't know, camo or blue with some stripes. Nothing crazy. And so these guys did this, but their brand messaging has shifted over time to a point where now it's pretty professional, but the messaging is dialed in and people know who they are and everything. But their messages are funny. They'll oftentimes take photos of actors in the 80s, like men. With their hairy chests and whatever, and wearing really short shorts, and they're like, it's time to bring back the short shorts, stuff like that. But it's just a funny brand. But they didn't start off that way. If I were to launch a short brand today and try to emulate what they're doing, it would fall flat because there's already someone kind of filling that need. But they had to go into that. They didn't know exactly what they needed to do. They had an angle. But they didn't know exactly, and then it took them several years of consistent marketing effort to do that, and now they do really well. The same thing can work with products too, but go ahead.
No, sorry to cut you off, but I don't want to forget this point you just made. The point Blake just mentioned is this company was testing and giving what the customer wanted. Like they didn't say, we sell shorts this way, and that's the only way we're going to sell them. No matter what the customer says, they adjust to what the market is telling them they want. And so that's something that I wanted to interrupt and make sure we hit on that, because really that's important. A great point.
And that's kind of like the whole point of business in general. The great thing about owning your own business is you can make your own products and services. And so because of that flexibility, I think a lot of people kind of forget this point. Because of that flexibility, you can literally adjust your products and services to match whatever the customers want. And theoretically, this is super simple. It's like, people like this t-shirt. Let's maybe ask a few of them why they like that t-shirt, and then let's make some more that have those qualities in there. Is it the quality of the fabric? Is it the funny message? What about the message? Is it the design? Is it the colors? Whatever those are, and then launch some similar to that and see what people resonate with, and then drop the duds or bundle the duds. Bundle the duds to get rid of them is a special flash sale offer or something like that.
If you buy this, you get these for free.
You get these for free or whatever, But you need to, going back to what you said about removing your emotion. I heard this phrase this week, and I loved it. At some points in time, you just need to be a stone cold professional, right? And I like being loosey-goosey and running a kind of a casual business and things. But when it comes to ads and emotion, you got to be a stone-cold professional, and you have to look at which ones are working and which ones aren't. Because if you keep turning off the ads that are working because you don't like that the picture isn't super professional,
or you just have a feeling,
you're constantly, you're literally shutting off your revenue sources. It's like, I'm thirsty, and you keep turning off the water spouts that are giving me the most water. Why would we do that? It's because of oftentimes your own personal insecurities or visions or whatever.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. So just yesterday, I had a call with one of my clients, and they have a unique setup where it's like kind of 3 owners, and they're all very open-minded and willing to try things, which is great. So we spoke yesterday, and it's funny how it was a good lesson in emotional decision-making versus the data, right? Because 2 of the people of the 3 felt that the ads were performing exceptionally well. And then one of them felt that the ads weren't performing at all, which is interesting, right? So they were both trying to figure out, why do you believe that the ads are not performing well at all. And they're like, well, I just been hearing that people's sales. And so now think about this. She said, I just been hearing about other people's sales, and the sales are this and that, and maybe it's a tough time. And the other two are just looking at the data from the ad account.
Yeah.
And saying, we're getting what we want. Mm-hmm. They got 500 subscribers, just so you know, for $300-something targeted U.S. Canada leads.
That's cheap.
Yeah.
That's cheap.
It's to the exact targeted audience that they want.
Yeah.
And so after we went through the numbers, she actually felt like, wow, this campaign's doing really well. Mm-hmm. We literally almost turned it off because she was like, I just don't know if it's resonating or this, and that.
Yeah.
And so that's, to me, a perfect example of how you can feel an emotion, and if you sometimes follow that emotion, you can make the wrong decision for your business.
I think it's a bit of a catch-22 situation, because when you start, if you're a business owner or whatever, and you start diving into ads, you want to start learning about ads.
Yep.
And so you start learning about it. But then you start, there's no shortage of people out there willing to tell you how to run ads. And many of them disagree with one another. And guess what? We're here on a podcast telling you about how to run ads, right? Like, everybody and their dog's going to tell you that. And you're going to have people that are going to say, this is the only way I would run ads right now, because you hear that messaging all the time. Oh, yeah. And then you start knowing and learning more, and then you start second-guessing what you know is working.
Yep.
And so at some point in time, I'm a big believer, at some point in time, you need to kind of shut off the gurus and trust yourself. Trust yourself and the things that you've learned that are working with your business and everything. It's okay to learn a few things here or there. And I think in our podcast, we're not super opinionated about absolutely do it this way, do this one structure. If you do this one structure, it'll work, because it's not really sustainable. Things change too much. We talk a lot more about principles and things. So that's my hint that you should keep listening to this podcast. But trust yourself in what's working for your business, and maybe shut off some of these other channels with these loud voices trying to teach you how to run ads and whatnot.
And the other thing about, you got to be careful with how much you can get information overload, where one person will say, look at anything in life, how to make the most money, right? That's a subject everyone's probably looked up before. You got some people who say you should focus on one business. Then you got some people who say you should have 20 streams of income, right? Which one is the correct way? Well, it depends. If you're already a millionaire, 20 streams might make sense because you've already have $1 million and you can diversify. If you have $10, it makes no sense to try to attempt to do 20 different businesses. And so it really depends on each person. And so if you take information and you almost just think, okay, this is the way no matter what, versus saying, how can I apply some of these principles into what I'm doing? You can get very confused, and what you're going to do is just be in a cycle of starting and stopping over and over and over again, and gain zero momentum.
Right.
And then because you don't gain any momentum, you're keeping yourself in the hardest stage of anything, which is the very beginning. You're literally keeping yourself in the hardest stage.
The hardest part, and you're getting burnt out because you're stuck in this loop where you don't get out of the hard part. Yep. You're still in the hard part.
And the worst part is you're the one doing it to yourself. You're actually resetting and restarting your progress over and over and over and over again, instead of looking at how can we build some momentum, let the momentum work for me, and let me make adjustments as I go along, instead of start, stop. And that's something that I also see a lot, is the starting and stopping. You hear people say, well, I've tried this or I've tried that, and then you go, well, but for how long? Well, I ran it for 3 days, I spent $50, and it's like, there's no, you never gave anything a chance to build a momentum. The people who see the best results in any aspect, making money, running ads, exercise and fitness, marriage, it's all the same. Long term, build momentum, fundamentals. There's no tricks to start and stop over and over again, because if you get overly fixated on that, you literally will keep yourself in the hardest part of the journey over and over again.
So, this is Greg's marriage counseling session. We've turned it into a relationship podcast.
This is marriage counseling.
But it's true. Like, these are the reason we talk about principles a lot is because a lot of these principles carry over into many different aspects and can be applied to many different things. And it's so easy to get hung up on a lot of these details and everything, but when it really boils down to it, running a business, at least the principles of running a business, is pretty straightforward. You just need to give people more of what they want and stop doing what's not working and follow those numbers. That's
and the podcast.
That's
there you
it.
Go. Well,
that's it. You know, we're shutting everything down. We buy our course. It will be that one sentence.
Yep.
Do more of what people like and less of what they don't.
Such a simple statement, but
it's
so
hard
true.
to do. I don't want to minimize it. Like, I've definitely struggled with that.
Of course,
in my business.
same here.
We're emotional beings. Like, we do that. I've been so hung up on my emotions before with various different aspects of my business and everything. I get it. So it's easy to say, and I know it's hard to implement, but it's one of those things that you should constantly strive to maybe gut check those emotions.
Well, you know what? Speaking of emotions, this is why you should, before you make any decision, take a step back with what am I feeling right now, and is it real? Mm-hmm. And I'll give you an example. Let's say, not that this has ever happened to me, but let's say you didn't sleep for a few days because your babies didn't go to sleep and you're extremely exhausted, right? Well, sometimes when you're very tired, you start, like the little things that maybe don't bother you will start to bother you, right?
Yeah.
But you could really make some really dumb decisions if you let that portion impact your decision making. Instead, you have to go, well, this is probably fake. None of this is really that bad. It's that I just haven't slept for 3 days.
Yeah.
And so I actually exercised this a couple of days ago. And I was like, I wish I knew this like 15 years ago. But it was, so I didn't have a great night's sleep. Mm-hmm. And then I found out some information of like some changes that we needed to make on a certain campaign. And I felt like, you know what, I'm just really tired and I don't want to say yes or no or make any adjustments based on how tired I am. So I'm just going to, and I would have never done this 10, 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to not do anything. I'm just going to go to sleep tonight. And then tomorrow when I wake up, I'm going to think, what's the best decision? I waited one day and made the correct decision, and it was the decision that I wouldn't have made the day before. So even that taught me the importance of taking a step back, right? Let's say you're very tired from exercise or family, or maybe you have someone pass away in your family, or you've just got outside life factors. Sometimes those can transfer into, like, the one thing you can control, your business. You're looking for a sense of control. And so you control that, right? Yeah. Versus taking a step back and going, is this real?
Yeah. Yeah, I get that all the time, right? And I feel that way a lot. It's and not to get too much into, mental health or whatever, but when you're in like a mental health cycle, which I think more people need to talk about mental health. It's certainly not a bad thing. We all go through stressful moments or moments where things aren't going right, but it's very easy to kind of get stuck in a cycle.
Sure.
And when I do, me personally, I get an inner dialogue that is negative.
Yeah.
And and I have to gut check that. And my wife helps me gut check that, which is great. But I have to gut check that and say, wait, is this inner dialogue actually reflective of reality?
Yeah, most of the time it's not.
A couple of times it is, but it's too harsh.
Yeah,
because obviously we have things to work on, right?
Yeah,
everybody does. But my kind of point in sharing that is we have that, but a good way to kind of check those things is to have someone else you can talk to.
Yep.
And I'm telling you right now, most of the time with Greg and his clients, he's honestly more of a therapist.
It's true.
than a media buyer.
It's true.
But no, you need to gut check yourself, and that's why having a media buyer on your team or a business partner or an associate, or if you're just starting out, I don't know, just someone that's maybe not just anyone that doesn't know anything about ads, because that would be frustrating, but maybe someone that knows a little bit about marketing and advertising, just to bounce some ideas off of them and to gut check yourself or whatever. But it's totally okay to think, am I thinking about this correctly or or whatever? And when in doubt, just follow the numbers.
Yeah, and I think too, the importance of having an outside eye on things or someone to bounce ideas off of is important, because the likelihood that both of you are feeling the exact same emotion at the exact same time is highly unlikely. Right. So if you're, let's say, having problems at home, or you're having problems at work, or you're having problems with your health, whatever that is, most likely the other person you're talking to is not going through the exact same thing at the exact same time, and so they don't feel as emotionally kind of boxed in as maybe you are. So they're able to give a little bit more constructive feedback on, like, you should do this or try this or take a step back. And so that's where I see the value of having other people to bounce ideas off of and really talk things through. And I know for me, anytime we're going into the emotional side of things, because that's probably the most important thing you can do for making the best decisions for your business long term, is controlling your emotions and understanding them better. Because if you know your tendencies, right? Like, for example, I know if I don't sleep that great, sometimes I get a little more anxious, more antsy with things. Maybe my fuse is shorter, right? Well, I know that. So if that happens, I know to go, well, I'm going to back out of some appointments. I'm going to go do something completely unrelated and relaxing, so that I can prevent myself from even putting myself in the environment of making a bad decision.
Yeah.
Right? Because I know that's how I behave.
Yeah.
If I don't get any sleep or I'm just physically exhausted. And so, do you have any kind of tactics that you like to use when you kind of know you're at your threshold? You're like, well, before I do anything that I'm not going to be happy with, let me go ahead and step away.
I have lots. So first and foremost, one of the most consistent triggers for me to be grumpy is I'm hungry.
Me too.
Because I focus on work. Like when I sit down, I usually work really hard, and I've got I'm juggling between a couple of different things, and it's very easy for me to forget that I need to eat and have water, like drink water. And so first and foremost, I kind of prep for that.
Yeah.
I intentionally don't eat like snacks and things at my desk, because it's too easy to just keep cramming food. But I have them like away from my desk, and I'll go up and grab a handful and check the time. I try to be pretty consistent with meals. Like I'm like a little baby. If I don't get fed on time, I start getting whiny. But the other thing I've been doing recently is I work in a remote office, and I have set up this cozy corner with a chair and an ottoman and some plants and a blanket. And I sit down, and I call it meditation. Sometimes it turns into a nap. I set a timer because I don't want to sleep for
form of meditation.
But it's I basically the point of it is I sit there and I try to just kind of clear my head of thoughts, because I have a lot of thoughts going on a lot of the time, and there's a bunch of different techniques. People can, like, in their head chant different things or whatever. What I do is I just count backwards from 100. I need something more than just saying the same thing, because my brain can think about things while I'm saying something. I can go into autopilot. But if I have to count backwards, I have to think about it a little bit. You have to focus. Just a little bit. But I don't want something too complicated. But something that makes me have to focus enough so that I'm not thinking about this software engineering problem or this customer problem that I'm dealing with or whatever. I don't want those things to spin. And I do it for 20, 30 minutes. And it sounds, I don't know, it helps a lot. It helps a lot.
I think it's important to prioritize time like that in your day, particularly if you're running ads, or you've got anxiety about running ads, or you've got anxiety about just anything else that's going on in your business. Because if you don't take that time out, you're setting yourself up for massive failure, because you're going to start to feel these emotions, and they'll start to compound. So the anxiety starts to go into depression, and the depression starts going into anger. And then it becomes, well, I don't even know if I should do this. And then before you know it, it's like, but nothing in your business has actually changed. It's only your emotions that have changed, right? And it's just funny because there's so many times where you can, from running my own stuff for quite a while now, I've learned a thing or two about self-management for me and how I behave. And I just try to really go, all right, I have felt this emotion before. And the decisions I made in the past weren't always the most productive, right? And so knowing that, what can I do differently when this comes up again? And you just kind of like step back and try to learn from previous mistakes or errors. And at the time you don't know better, but now you do, right? Like now you understand how to improve these. I feel like if you spend more time, here's something that I don't know if I've ever actually revealed, but I try to spend more time, quote unquote, like having fun than working. And I consistently try to keep that unbalanced. And the reason why I do that is because I have a tendency to want, like, if I don't stop myself, I want to work the whole day.
Oh, that's me.
And all day.
Yeah.
And that's unhealthy. So because of that, I switched my thinking. I just said I need to actually focus more on having fun, because I run into the opposite problem of almost working yourself to death.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's my default. My default answer to every problem is to work harder.
Yeah.
And I don't love that. I mean, I'm glad I'm a hard worker, but I don't love that. The older I get, the more I realize that's not a healthy trait.
Nope.
You gotta have a good balance. And frankly, I'm trying to teach my kids that as well. It's hard, right? Because a lot of aspects of life, in a lot of aspects of life, like school and things, when my kids are in school, school is pitching it as, this is the most important thing. You got a bunch of homework. These grades matter, especially my son that's in high school. These grades are starting to really matter.
Yep.
And they're not wrong about any of those things. And I absolutely am a huge fan of being as educated as you can.
Sure.
But sometimes I feel like there's so much emphasis put on working hard and putting in all of this extra effort when our quality of life isn't there. So we get into these habits. College was very much like that for me. I was working full-time, doing school full-time, and had a family. And that was, a few years of basically just kind of, I did it. I just didn't sleep a whole lot, but it kind of set this stage where my default solution to every problem is to work hard. And it's not fun when you do that. Like, it's not enjoyable.
Well, I think too you can get a lot of the wrong messages from making things quote unquote matter. One of my things that I've learned over time with making things matter is when you attach too much of a meaning to something, I find in my own experience that it creates a negative thought pattern, a negative cycle. You're no longer doing things for enjoyment or to improve yourself. You're now acting out of fear, right? And you're acting out of fear that something bad is going to happen. And then you're basically robbing all the enjoyment out of your life. And because you make something matter more, doesn't mean you will actually perform better. That's kind of the irony of it.
That's a good point.
A lot of times you perform worse.
Yes.
So you're increasing the meaning of something with the kind of thinking that if I make it matter more, I'll perform better. But the irony is you don't. You perform worse when you make it matter more.
Yeah, there's a lot more stress, anxiety, mental energy needed to this thing that's like super, super, super important. I think that's we're getting philosophical here, but I think that's one. Important. I think that's I do. I think that's one of the reasons why I struggle with a lot of when like someone who's wildly successful writes a book and they're like, here's how you do a startup business or whatever. It's like, you don't have a lot of the anxiety and stress because you have this massive cushion and blanket and everything. And so I don't think your information is actually that relevant to your average everyday person because they have a different set of circumstances. And of course you can run 20, 30 businesses because you have a team helping you with this and all of these things.
And a payroll of $20 million a month.
Right. And that's all fine. Like, I'm not saying that person is bad. I'm just saying I really struggle when someone who's up here is telling people down here how to get up here, because most of the time I don't think they actually know how to do it. Yeah. I think they know how they did it.
Yep.
But I don't think they know how to teach others to do it because the circumstances are so different.
Yep.
So my very first example of like really this thought thinking sinking in is when I read Elon Musk's autobiography, and it was written back in 2015, and he's a much more famous character now than back then. But the book was talking about how he was one of the founders of PayPal, sold that, had a lot of money, but he dumped it right back into starting 3 different businesses: SpaceX, Tesla, and Solar City, or whatever the solar one is. And slept on people's couches because he dumped all the money in there, and he was working 130 hours a week and all of this stuff. And I was thinking, well, that just sounds terrible.
Yeah.
That sounds absolutely terrible. And I just didn't think that was realistic for literally any average person. And that doesn't mean that someone like Elon Musk that was able to do that has more mental strength and more grit or whatever. It probably means that aspect of his life was quite unhealthy.
Yeah.
And people that have a more healthy, well-rounded aspect of life probably would choose to not do that.
Yeah,
and that doesn't mean you're weak or whatever. You'd be like, I don't see the need for that.
And I think you have to make agreements with yourself, right? One thing that over time I've come to, I guess, peace with is not necessarily, okay, what are you willing to sacrifice for your life, not for someone else's or to impress someone else's, right? Meaning, yeah, we can all, so you're not weak if you say, you know what, I am Greg and that's Elon. Okay, Elon is wired to want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Greg is not. I have no desire to run $3 billion companies because you know what that means? No free time, a microscope on you 24 hours a day, no privacy. That just sounds horrific to me. I would much rather do a whole lot less and have massive free time, financial freedom, not so much in the public eye, and just be able to live my normal life. We only live once, right? So it's like I don't want to create a jail for myself because a lot of things that people may not realize, it's like imagine being someone like Elon or Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg where your every move is calculated. You can't go to the movies and watch you can't go to the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do a lot of things, right? So there's a price for this. It's not all good with nothing, being taken away.
Yeah.
A lot of your freedoms are taken away.
Yeah.
You think Mark Zuckerberg can just walk down the street with no security, go play basketball with people, just start shaking hands with people, just go to random church and hang out? There's no chance in the world he could do that.
No.
He'd have to call all his security people and set up all of these schedules and time to do so. So there's a price to be paid. And I think growing up, I always thought I have to be willing to pay the biggest price no matter what, or that means I'm weak, right? And I don't think that's true. Like now that I'm getting older, I'm looking at it like, well, that's actually not true at all.
Yeah.
It's you decide what you want to do and what sacrifice you want to make.
Yeah. It's, I had a ton of thoughts while you're
going on a rant.
going on that rant. And I, we're kind of getting long-winded, so we'll definitely wrap this up here in just a second. But I think I have a question for you. Do you know the name of the person who started MySpace?
Oh yeah, Tom.
Tom,
right?
Do you want to know why most people don't know Tom's name? Because he sold his business and retired.
I've never seen I think I looked him up once.
Yeah, he's just like. He sold his business for, I don't know, it was a lot of money at the time. I want to say over $100 million or whatever. He sold MySpace to YouTube, I think, and then they drove it into the ground. But whatever. But here's the thing: is like Tom got to this point, and he's like, I think I've made it.
Yeah,
and I think he does personal projects and things. He's a tinkerer.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's out there under some pseudonyms on, I don't know, Reddit or on GitHub writing code because he likes to do that kind of stuff. He's not in the public eye. That guy is the genius, right? Like
he figured it out.
He did the thing, and the thing is Gates, Bezos, Zuckerberg, all of those guys, they all could have done that.
Yep.
They all could have done that, but they chose not to. And so I really struggle like holding a lot of those people up in a high esteem, and even listening to their tweets or what they say like ever, because they are so much different than me. My core values are so different that, let's say we wave a magic wand and Blake Buse started Amazon in the 90s.
Yeah.
I guarantee you I would have sold that business way sooner, and then you would have never heard of me again, and I would have had a peaceful life.
Then you just hired
with
Jeff
my
Bezos
kids. I probably would have, I would have done philanthropy or whatever. And there's so many things in my life that I would find much more fulfilling than trying to take a business from being a $200 million business to being a $200 billion business. I like that doesn't even sound fun to me. And so I don't want to like listen to what they have to say all the time, because I just don't think they are even close to sharing my values.
Yeah, and I think, it's funny you brought up Tom, because I just remember him because he was my friend for so long on MySpace. Remember
he was friends with everybody.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Remember the infamous picture? But that's a great example. And I think, overall, pretty much this podcast episode, we wanted to go over something that I think a lot of business and or marketers don't really ever talk about, because it's like kind of that taboo subject, which is looking at your emotions and kind of really making quality deals and agreements with yourself, not because you feel like you have to do something because it matters.
What matters, or you're emulating this person or business that's up here. Like literally put in the work, trust yourself. Don't over-exaggerate the worth of something. Follow the data. Be a stone-cold professional.
Yeah. But do it your way.
Yeah,
do it your way. Find what works for you and do that versus trying to do what you're supposed to do, right? So I think outside of that, right, we got long-winded, but hopefully
let's wrap it up.
This is valuable. So Blake, how do they get a hold of you?
Just go to blakebuse.com/SM3.
And get a hold of me at gregmarshall.co, and you can book a free strategy session with me. And until next time,
we'll catch you guys later.
Bye.